At my college graduation party, my stepmother hit me in front of all the guests when I announced my engagement, and I lost consciousness. "How dare you announce the engagement without permission?" she yelled. I remained unconscious for 3 days, and when I woke up, I was shocked to see Thash in the family. My name is Elisa Milano, and here is the tale of how I defied my domineering family and forged my own route. It wasn't simple, but often the most liberating decisions are the most difficult ones. I am 23 years old, and I will graduate with honors from Albany University in a few weeks. On paper, I'm intelligent, successful, and poised, everything a family like mine could possibly want, as they like to nickname me the golden child. It sounds ideal, doesn't it? I'll tell you a little secret though. Being flawless wears you out. "Alyssa, please correct your posture, my love." As I enter the family home, my grandma Mia's piercing voice breaks the stillness. A Milano always stands tall. No matter how stealthily I attempt to enter, she always finds out. I think the woman has eyeballs in the back of her skull sometimes. I force a grin that seems more like a grimace and respond, "Yes, grandmother, I do adore my family." It's not that I don't. However, my grandmother, she is an unstoppable natural force. Her remarks are piercing enough to cut through anyone's confidence, and she walks like a queen and talks like a commander. "Alyssa has good posture, mother." With a half-hearted laugh, my dad, Raphael, tries to lighten the situation by saying she's not going to a debutante ball. "Please, Raphael," grandmother yells without pausing. "I'm just making sure the reputation of our family doesn't suffer." A Milano is never lazy. I glance to my mother, Rosalie, who gives me a calm, comforting nod. It's her way of expressing, "I've got your back," without using words. That's easier said than done with grandmother Mia though. I sneak into my room later that night and collapse on my bed. When my phone buzzes, I smile because it's Paul, my cover lover. I roll my eyes as I type, "You won't believe what my grandmother said today. Let me guess something about the Milano family reputation." He responds 2 seconds later. I laugh aloud. "Bingo." I reply with a text, "I think she's trademarked that phrase sometimes." Paul answers nearly immediately. My grandma, Haley, also had some harsh things to say about the Milanos today. When will this conflict be resolved? Yes, the notorious family dispute between Milano and Lai. It's similar to Romeo and Juliet, except with less heartbreaking love poetry and more expensive purses. You see, grandmother Mia's long-standing enemy is Paul's grandmother, Haley Lai. It seems that the dispute over which family should receive the most attention at a charity event began decades ago. Crazy, however, years later, we are still caught up in their conflict. My mother calls out from below, "Come down for dinner, Elisa." I swiftly delete my communications with Paul and groan. Believe me, it would be an incredible scandal if grandmother Mia ever discovered that I was seeing a lie. As usual, the dining room is magnificent with a polished mahogany table, sparkling chandeliers that seem like they belong in a palace, people that are most likely older than me, and a sense of anxiety that permeates any luxury place. Haley Lai's most recent charity event, did you hear about it? As piercing as ever, grandmother Mia sneers in disgust as if her lack of class is compensated for by throwing money around. Once more, here we go. A whole season of a reality TV program might be devoted to the turmoil in my family. I chew my food quietly, letting their voices blur into background noise as I zone out, dreaming of a life far away from this. For as long as I can remember, my path has always been paved for me. I've been told what to wear, how to speak, where to go, and who to associate with. Being a Milano comes with prestige, but it also comes with invisible shackles. But here's the thing. I'm not just a Milano. I'm Elisa. I have my own dreams, my own goals, and, yes, my own love, even if it's with someone my family would never approve of. Paul sees me for who I am, not for the title I carry, and that means everything. Over the next few days, I find myself at a crossroads. Graduation is so close I can taste it, and with it comes a choice. Do I continue down the path my family expects me to take, polished, perfect, and suffocated, or do I step off this gilded road and find my own way even if it means disappointing the people I care about? For the first time in my life, I feel brave enough to ask myself, what does Elisa Milano want? It's a question that will change everything. This is my story. The story of how I stopped being the golden child and started being me. I bite my tongue, resisting the urge to defend Paul's family. Instead, I focus on my plate, pushing around the organic kale salad sitting untouched in front of me. "Now, Elisa," grandmother Mia's sharp voice cuts through the quiet tension, turning her attention fully on me. "Have you given any thought to which law firm you'll be interning at this summer? I've spoken to Aidan Gillan, and he's more than willing to put a good word for you at his son's firm." I pause, my heart racing, but gather every ounce of courage I can muster. "Actually, grandmother, I begin, my voice shaky but determined. I've been thinking about taking a different path after graduation, maybe exploring non-profit work. The silence that follows is deafening. It feels as though I've just announced I'm running away to join a traveling circus. Non-profits. Grandmother's voice is dangerously low, dripping with disapproval. Alyssa, dear, Milanos do not do non-profit. We lead, we succeed, we dominate. Her words land like heavy stones, each one designed to crush my resolve. I feel my courage waver under her piercing gaze. But then I think of Paul and the life I want. A life where I decide who I am and what I do, not one that's been mapped out for me since birth. I understand, grandmother, I reply, my voice surprisingly steady, but I believe there are many ways to lead and succeed. I'd like the chance to find my own path. The tension in the room is suffocating. My parents exchange worried glances caught between wanting to support me and fearing the consequences of standing up to grandmother Mia. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind races. I know I'm walking a fine line between the life that's expected of me and the one I actually want, but for the first time, I feel ready to stand up for myself no matter the consequences. The next day, the Grand Hall at Chili's Grill and Bar is a whirlwind of activity. Crystal glasses clink as Albany's elites celebrate my graduation. Servers glide through the crowd with trays of champagne. I stand in the center of it all, forcing a smile as yet another one of grandmother's friends congratulates me. Alyssa, darling, come here for a moment. Grandmother Mia calls, her voice effortlessly commanding attention. Excuse me, I say politely to the woman I've been speaking with. My heels click across the polished marble floors as I make my way over. Yes, grandmother? I ask carefully, keeping my expression neutral. Gentlemen, grandmother begins, her tone full of pride as she gestures toward me. This is my granddaughter, Alyssa. She's just graduated summa cum laude from Albany University. One of the men nods, clearly impressed. Following in your grandmother's footsteps, I see, he remarks. I hesitate for a split second, the weight of their expectations pressing on me like a physical force. I know what I'm supposed to say, that I'm honored, that I'll make the Milano family proud. Instead, I take a deep breath and let the words I've been holding back finally spill out. Actually, I say, meeting their gazes with as much confidence as I can summon, I'm hoping to forge my own path. I'm passionate about non-profit work and making a real difference in people's lives. The air around us grows still. The men exchange brief, polite smiles, clearly uncertain how to respond. Grandmother's expression remains perfectly composed, but I can see the flicker of frustration in her eyes. Well, that's unexpected, one of the men mutters, forcing a pilot smile. Alyssa has always been ambitious, grandmother says sharply, her voice smooth, but carrying an undeniable edge. I'm sure this is just a phase. It's not a phase, I reply softly but firmly. Grandmother doesn't respond. Instead, she gives me a long calculated look before turning back to the men. I know she'll have more to say later, but for now, I've done it. I've spoken up. As I stand there surrounded by the of chatter and clinking glasses, I feel a mix of fear and freedom course through me. This won't be easy. Disappointing grandmother never is. But for the first time, I know I'm on the right path. My path. The room falls into a strange silence as I step away from grandmother and toward the center of the hall. My heels click against the marble floor, echoing like thunder in my ears. Everyone, I call out, my voice rising above the murmur of chatter. May I have your attention, please? Slowly, the room quiets and all eyes turn to me. My heart pounds so hard it feels like it might burst, but I take a deep breath and stand tall. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my graduation. I begin, forcing a small smile. But tonight, there's something else I'd like to celebrate. Out of the corner of my eye, I see grandmother Mia pushing through the crowd, her face contorted in confusion. The first crack in her otherwise flawless armor. I'm engaged, I announce, my voice ringing out clear and strong, to Paul. The room froze, time itself seemingly suspended for a long breathless moment. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, almost on cue, Paul stepped forward from across the room. He moved confidently, his presence grounding me. He reached for my hand, his warm smile reassuring. It's true, he said, his voice calm and steady. He looked at me with such affection it made my heart swell. We're in love. The crowd erupted into a chorus of shocked whispers and gasps. Lie? As in Haley L's grandson, I heard someone mutter. But the feud? The Milanos and the L's hate each other. Another voice whispered in disbelief. Fragments of conversation swirled around me, but I tuned them all out. My focus remained on Paul and on the promise of the life we wanted to build together. Confrontation. Then I saw her. Grandmother Mia. Her face was a mask of fury unlike anything I had ever seen before. She shoved past the last few people in her way and stopped just inches from me, her eyes blazing with rage. How dare you? She hissed, her voice low and sharp enough to cut glass. "How dare you embarrass me like this in front of everyone?" "Grandmother, I tried to explain, but she didn't give me a chance." Without warning, her hand lashed out, striking me across the face so hard I stumbled backward. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the world spun and darkened around me. My knees buckled, and then everything went black. Awakening. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head cradled in Paul's lap. His worried face swam into focus as the sounds of chaos filled the room. People were shouting, some rushing out in a flurry, while my parents desperately tried to calm things down. "Alyssa, can you hear me?" Paul's voice was tight with concern as he looked down at me. I blinked, my head throbbing. "What happened?" I mumbled, trying to sit up. Paul gently held me still. "Don't move. Your grandmother, she hit you. You blacked out for a few minutes. We're taking you to the hospital." I nodded weakly, my mind swimming as the events replayed in my head. My father appeared on my other side, his face pale with worry. Together, they carefully helped me to my feet. My cheek burned and I winced at the pain, but I stood as tall as I could. The room was still in disarray, whispers and judgmental glances flying everywhere. Yet, as Paul wrapped his arm around me protectively and led me toward the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. A turning point. I knew this moment would change everything for my family, for me, and for Paul. But for the first time in my life, I was ready to face it because this time, I was standing up, not as a Milano, not as my grandmother's puppet, but as Elisa, and I would never look back. I saw my grandmother standing off to the side, her face cold and indifferent. There was no anger, no sadness, just an icy detachment that cut deeper than any words she could say. "Mother, how could you?" My father's voice trembled with fury as he confronted her. "She's your granddaughter." Grandmother Mia's lips curled into a faint dismissive smile. "She made her choice," she said coolly. Then her tone turned steely, each word sharper than the last. "She's no granddaughter of mine." Those words hit me harder than the slap that sent me to the ground. Reflection. As I was led toward the waiting ambulance, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the price of standing up for myself? And if it was I ready to pay it? When I woke up, I was in a sterile hospital room. The scent of disinfectant filled my nose and the soft beeping of machines echoed nearby. My head pounded and, for a moment, I couldn't remember why I was there. Then, like a floodgate opening, it all came rushing back. The party, the announcement, grandmother's fury. "Elisa, you're awake." Paul's voice broke through my daze filled with relief. He was sitting by my bedside, dark circles shadowing his eyes as though he hadn't slept in days. Moving forward, over the next few weeks, I faced some of the hardest moments of my life. I moved out of the family home, packing up my things while ignoring my grandmother's threats and guilt trips. She thought I'd break that I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. I accepted a job offer in San Antonio, a position with a non-profit organization. I had been too afraid to consider it before. The opportunity had always been there waiting, but I'd let fear and family expectations hold me back. Not anymore. It wasn't easy starting over. It never is. But as the days passed, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Paul was by my side every step of the way. He helped me find a small apartment in the city just big enough to feel like home, and he offered unwavering support when the nightmares came. Because they did come. Flashes of that night. My grandmother's furious face, the sharp sting of her hand, the cold finality of her words. "Maybe I should see someone," I admitted to Paul one night after waking up drenched in sweat. He sat beside me, his hand gently rubbing my back as I tried to catch my breath. "You should," he said softly, his voice full of love and understanding. "There's no shame in getting help, Alyssa. What you've been through, it's a lot." I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. For so long, I'd carried the weight of being a Milano, of being perfect, but now I was ready to let that weight go. In the months that followed, I found myself again. I poured my energy into my new job, helping people in ways that felt meaningful and real. I built a life that was mine, one free of expectations and judgment. My relationship with my parents began to heal as they realized how much I'd sacrificed to make them proud. And Paul stood by me through it all. One day, as I stood on the balcony of my little son, Antonio, apartment staring out at the bustling city below, I felt a quiet sense of peace. I had lost so much: my grandmother's love, the security of my old life, but I had gained something far more valuable, myself. For the first time in my life, I was living on my terms. I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was strong enough to face them. "I think that's a great idea," Paul said softly. "I'll go with you if you want." True to his word, Paul was there for me through everything. Every therapy session, every panic attack, and every moment when I doubted myself. Even when Grandmother Mia kept trying to break us apart, including a subtle threat to his family's business, Paul stood firmly by my side. Meanwhile, grandmother's perfect world was fallen apart. I heard whispers that some of her business partners had distanced themselves, not wanting to be connected to someone who had hit her own granddaughter. One evening, Paul showed me his phone. "Did you see this?" he asked. It was a video of grandmother being surrounded by reporters outside her office. "Mrs. Milano, do you have any comments on the assault allegations?" one reporter asked. "Is it true you tried to bribe your granddaughter's fee and say?" Another pushed. "How do you respond to claims that you're using your influence to hide the story?" Grandmother's face was full of anger as she ignored the questions and shoved past the reporters without saying a word. "Karma's a nightmare," I muttered, feeling both satisfied and a little sad. That part of my life was over. 3 years flew by in San Antonio. Paul and I got married in a small, simple ceremony far away from the Albany society pages. It was quiet, beautiful, and exactly what we wanted. We were happy, building a life together on our own terms. Then one day, an invitation arrived. A charity gala in Albany. I hesitated, holding the invitation in my hands, but Paul squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We can handle it. We're not the same people we were 3 years ago." When we walked into the grand ballroom, I could feel the eyes on us, hear the whispers behind our backs. I held my head high and kept moving. Then I saw her. Grandmother Mia. She was standing alone by the bar looking smaller, less intimidating than I remembered. Our eyes met, and to my surprise, she walked toward me. "Alyssa," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. It lacked its usual confidence and power. "I'm glad you came." "Grandmother," I replied coolly. She glanced around nervously as if checking who was watching. "I was hoping we could talk. I want to apologize for what happened. I reacted poorly, and I'm sorry." I froze, shocked. An apology from Mia Milano. I never thought I'd hear those words, but when I looked into her eyes, I saw no real regret, only desperation. "I appreciate the sentiment," I said calmly, "but I'm afraid it's too little, too late." Her face fell. "But we're family," she said quickly, almost pleading. "Surely, we can move past this." I shook my head, my voice steady. "Some actions are unforgivable, grandmother. That night, you showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked truly defeated. As we stood there, I began to learn just how far she'd fallen. Her company had lost major contracts. Several employees had come forward with lawsuits accusing her of years of mistreatment and abuse. Her social circle, the very people she once ruled over, had abandoned her. Many of them had even sided with Haley Leary, her lifelong rival. Grandmother Mia, once untouchable, was now alone. As I turned to leave, Paul took my hand, and we walked away together. I felt lighter than I had in years. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was free, and for me, that was enough. She added, "I've lost everything," with a little tremble in her voice. I could still feel the wrath I knew so well. "And for what purpose?" "Because you are unable to carry out my plan for you." It was there. The mask came off, revealing the same Mia once again. "No, grandmother," I said, maintaining a steady and composed tone. "Your own actions caused you to lose everything. Seeing others as nothing more than puppets in your game, your harshness, and your urge to rule everyone, you are now facing the repercussions of the decisions you made." For once, she was unable to speak as she gazed at me. I inhaled and carried on. "I've moved on," I firmly informed her. "I am surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I am successful, and I am happy. You and your approval are no longer necessary for me." I turned and left after saying that. I didn't turn around. Mia Milano stood there by alone, vestige of a world that had vanished, a ghost of the strong woman she had once been. What are your thoughts? Does family toxicity reach a point where it can no longer be tolerated? At what point in the narrative would you have left Mia? Or do you believe that everyone is worthy of another chance? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Others experiencing similar circumstances could benefit from your viewpoint.